Hello, welcome back, I'm Darren. And today we're just gonna go through some random stuff, I suppose. Now, I think the first one to probably go through is I have just moved back to I use this monitor, but I've only ever used it on my sim rig, so I've not actually used it in a desktop application. And I'm kind of now getting to grips with more of what I like about it and what is annoying. And there are a few things. Probably one of the first ones is literally just trying to record this video is a nightmare. And that's because I'm on software which is basically trying to match a resolution that I can't do. So I obviously have a 4K webcam, which I'm using at the moment, and obviously matching that onto a 4K screen to screen capture is fine. Trying to set this up on a 34 by 40p canvas, nightmare. So that's already an annoyance. But yeah, obviously I'm on the Alienware. So it is a 34 by 40 1440p monitor, OLED, and I've still got mixed feelings about it. Some places I love it. So I don't know if you've seen, I put a video up of Cyberpunk, and in Cyberpunk I thought it looked incredible. And it's probably hard for me playing Cyberpunk to actually feel that much difference to 4K when I was running HDR, because the HDR in Cyberpunk works really well. And when you match the HDR with path tracing, it looks incredible. So obviously my 4K monitor isn't really a HDR capable monitor, it's just like a 400 nits or whatever it is monitor. It's not classed as a HDR monitor, it's not going to give me decent black levels and all the rest of it. So this was my first test at trying out some HDR content, and that still left me kind of annoyed. Now I'm sure there'll be a lot of people playing obviously PC on televisions that will be on OLED televisions, your LG C2s, C3s, C1s, whatever it will be, and they've probably got a lot more knowledge than what I've got no knowledge. I literally just play everything on SDR, and I've actually found this week trying to go between SDR and HDR a really annoying kind of thing. It's actually bugged me like quite badly. It's left me quite frustrated. Obviously Windows HDR, I've not delved into the NVIDIA HDR yet, because a lot of people were saying that once launching that application they were having problems in other games with big performance loss and stuff like that. So I've kind of avoided using that so far. So I've only been using the Windows HDR, and obviously that's a bit of a nightmare. So when you kind of adjust desktop colors and all sorts of colors, and then you use HDR and then you go back and it all gets muddled and it all messes with each other, it's just really annoying. I don't know how they can't sort that out. I don't know why they have an auto HDR button that makes you enable HDR to be able, or to have to then enable the auto HDR. I understand it will auto set the game to HDR, but can they not just do an auto HDR that will set you to HDR for that game, and then once you come out of a HDR game it will just revert you back to SDR or something like that, because it's quite annoying. And so far HDR in Cyberpunk, awesome. HDR in the First Descendant, really good. I think I just had to do one little tweak in the, I can't remember which one it was. It was either brightness or contrast on the in-game menu that I just tweaked. Like, I think they were set to like 5 and 5 automatically, and I think I set one of them. It might have been the brightness or the other one to like 4 or 5. I can't remember, but it was only like one way or one or the other. The HDR in Cyberpunk, I just ran how it was, and that looked amazing. Other than that, it's very hit and miss. I did do a Red Dead Redemption, and I don't know. There's 2 levels of HDR in that. So there's a HDR gaming preset, and then there's a HDR cinematic. Both of those just didn't want to calibrate with my monitor. So obviously, when it says that you need to drop one of the levels so that the image there's like a black image or a black symbol in a white box, and you have to obviously drop it either way, the symbol wouldn't go. I couldn't drop it low enough to make that disappear. So the HDR in that just looked like washed out and all over the place. I did the Windows HDR calibration, and that was kind of hit and miss. I actually found I got rid of it because that was blowing out like too bright in certain games, whereas making like sidewalks and pathways just like glowing bright white. So I'm not sure about that. I just ended up going back to the Alienware profile, and that seems the best for me. So I just found that I was spending way too much time getting frustrated trying to sort out HDR colors, then coming out of it, then adding into recording in HDR. Oh my god, that's another level. Now I'm not using the NVIDIA Shadow Play, I'm not using the, if I don't have to, the AMD Adrenalin, and maybe they are easier for HDR, I don't know, maybe they are just a one-click button. I'm using OBS on both, and OBS you have to go in and set like, there's about 5 settings that you have to set in color profiles to then record in HDR. Now if you do what I did and you leave one of those which you suddenly can't find anymore off, I recorded about 8 videos last night that I've had to redo them all today, that I was doing in just SDR, and they were all screwed, and I didn't realise until I finished them all and then watched one back, and all of the colour was reverting to some in between HDR and SDR, just really nasty, and that really pushed me over the edge. So today I've just been using it standard, just running games at SDR, and I've been quite enjoying it. But I love the Ultrawide, and I was actually surprised. I quite enjoyed it in first-person shooters more than I thought I would. I did run a quick game of Call of Duty last night just to check what my colours looked like after I'd been messing around with them, and they looked fine in that. And I just played a quick match in that, and I actually got on alright with it, which I was quite surprised. And Grey Zone Warfare, I played on it. It takes you a little while to get used to using it as a first-person shooter, especially if you're on keyboard and mouse like I am. But once I'd kind of warmed up to it, felt fine. Games like First Descendant, awesome. So I still have mixed emotions about it. And then the actual resolution itself. Some games, so the First Descendant, I run it, and I find if I run it with HDR on, so in games that have good HDR, that to me makes a big difference about the resolution. So 1440p SDR in a lot of games, to me, I find just quite underwhelming. I did find in the First Descendant, because that does seem to have or it just works quite well on mine, I don't know, that seemed to have quite good HDR, and it looked really good once I enabled HDR. I actually even ran it last night with the 4080 using Epic settings and with RT, and with RT on epic settings, with HDR at 1440p, it looked really, really good. Performance obviously takes a hit, and RT is kind of a bit hit and miss, but it does add that little bit extra with the HDR. The HDR adds a bit extra, and then the RT on top does. And when you combine all of that, it almost looks, to me, well, it's awkward. It probably actually then looks better than just 4K, no RT and no HDR. So on that game, it suits it really well, and on the ultra-wide, it's really good on that game. So it's awkward. Cyberpunk, I really liked it. I like the ultra-wide on something like Red Dead Redemption 2, but I prefer it if I'm using DSR at 4K, which is hard to run. And I've started uploading some videos today on doing the difference between just the regular 34 by 40 or 3440 by 1440p, and then I've been running a DSR at 5160 by 2160, just to show the comparison. And in Grey Zone Warfare, the DSR 5160 is amazing. It's awkward. The 1440p on that, I think if you're used to it, it's alright. I started playing it and I thought, in fact, this game looks alright at 1440p, until I put the DSR on, and then I was like, no, it doesn't look alright at 1440p. So if you're used to it, you're going to think it does, and you're going to be fine. When I put the DSR on, the extra clarity, because it's such heavy foliage in the game, that it all becomes at 1440p, it all just merges in, it just blends into each other, and it all becomes a bit of a blob. Whereas when you have that extra bit of fidelity, when you knock it up to 4K, everything becomes individual. All the leaves become individual, all the plants become individual and don't just merge into each other, and it just cleans up the look a lot. And what else was it I found? Oh yeah, Once Human. So I ran a little bit more of that again, and same with that. 1440p is quite bad aliasing. It's a bit of a hit and miss, that game. Some of the visuals are quite good in it, some of them aren't great. At 4K, I actually like the clean image it gives you at 4K. It suits that game better. So again, I did prefer that with DSR. So I'm going to prefer that on my 4K monitor. But I did like the ultra-wide aspect. So it's kind of where I'm at the moment. And like, obviously on that subject, games. First Descendant, been playing that a lot. Awesome game. I'm really surprised how much hours I've put in. I don't expect to not put more hours in. I'm kind of a bit annoyed at the moment that I'm making other content, because it's not, there's so much First Descendant content. My content is not going to be of interest to anyone. So I'm doing other stuff, and I'll be honest, I'd rather be playing that game, because it's got me completely caught in. I know I was at work yesterday, I had to go back to work yesterday just for a day, and I kind of, the whole time I'm at work, I'm thinking, right, what am I going to do on that game tonight? Am I going to go and farm something, try and unlock a character, try and unlock a weapon, run the main story? What am I going to do? And the way they've done that in the game is brilliant. The way that you can just merge in with other players in the middle of a task, and the same way that they can merge in with you, is amazing. I went into a task the other day, I kind of walked up to a task, I knew it was going to be a hard one to run on my own, because it was one of the ones where you have to like protect whatever it is, like the machinery thing that you have to protect. And I knew that I was going to be in big trouble on my own, because it was a new area that I just unlocked, so I knew it was going to be higher class enemies. I waited around, no one else was around. I thought, right, stuff it, I'll give it a go, nothing to lose anyway. So I started it, and it was getting really heated, and out of the blue, a Bonnie decided to jump in and help me out, and we just dominated from that point on, because Bonnies are incredible in that game. Like, if you're in need of help, you know, You need to put up the bunny sign and hope that a bunny comes running along, because... But I love that about the game. That, to me, makes the game. It's like, oh my god, I need a bunny. And when they turn up, like, the bunny character is fantastic. I don't particularly want to play as Bunny, but I love the character, and I love the fact that there's a lot of people that do play as Bunny. So whenever you're in, you know, like a 4 cooperative, like 4 people group, you're pretty much guaranteed a bunny. I don't think I've played it without a bunny, and they're just hilarious. Like the voice comms that the character makes, the way that they just race around across the screen, it's like stroke of genius in that game. I think they've done really well, and I kind of hope that people do. I mean, saying that, I hope people pay into it. People are paying into it, because whenever I spawn in, there is no way that people aren't paying for a lot of the more expensive like character skins. So that's good to see, because I think the developers deserve it on that one. They've done really well. Really good mix of how they've blended in the gunplay with the co-op play. Absolutely brilliant. I was underwhelmed when I first started it. I think visually the first area, when you spawn into the first area and you realise it's quite a demanding game, visually it's not brilliant. And at first you kind of get a feeling that it's just going to be a copy and paste, same enemies, similar type of thing to do, and you don't realise the character unlocks all of the paths that you need to go through. It can look like it's going to be a bit of a lame game, to be honest. And that's exactly what I thought. And I was so wildly wrong. It's unreal. I mean, realistically, I could go in there now for a couple of hours and just try and unlock a new character by, instead of obviously purchasing, just by unlocking the parts that I need to unlock a character, which generally means that you go to certain areas to run tasks and just keep repeating the task until the item drops the item that you need. And the good thing about the way they've done that means that those tasks, generally you will find other groups of people are farming those tasks. You'll just jump in a group with someone else and you just keep doing it. And that actually makes it fun. It takes away how boring it could be, and it actually makes it, like, I was trying to farm a part last night. I gave up in the end. I must have run the task about 15, 16 times. The people that I was running with, some would obviously get the drop of what they needed and they'd go, and then someone else would jump in. But I was never on my own in it. In the end, I just thought, I'll tell you what, I'm in some sort of loop here where it's never going to drop it, so I'm going to come out of it, go run something else, and come back at another time and try again, because after 16 goes, I'm thinking, my luck's not in here. But it wasn't bad. I didn't leave frustrated. I actually enjoyed just repeat the task, because the characters were around me were actually quite funny with what they were doing. So they've done that. I've not played a game that they've done that well. So fair play to them. Once Human, I'm kind of hit and miss on that at the moment. I just uploaded a video, and I did go into what I can only assume is one of the first boss fights, or I'm not sure. There's kind of mini bosses. I think this was a main boss, because it was hard. It does look like you can queue up in a lobby. I wasn't quite sure what was happening there. I ended up going into it solo. Obviously I was screen capturing, and I kind of stumbled into it. It wasn't my intention to go into a boss fight, so I went for it. It's there in the video. I managed to do it just about. I'm kind of hit and miss on that game. Some of it looks good, some of it not so much. Some of the gameplay is quite good, some of it I feel a little bit bored by it. There's so much that I shouldn't feel bored by it, but I do feel bored by it. I don't know. I think that game is launched, for me personally, at the wrong time, while I'm still so into the First Descendant, unfortunately. I think if that would have come at another time, I might have been more interested in putting more time into it, or I might feel differently about it. I'm not sure. It's an awkward one. It's not a bad game, and it's a free game. So, same with the First Descendant. I'd say to anyone just download them and give them a go. You have nothing to lose. I think both of them you're going to get at least 10 hours of gameplay out of. I would, like, easily. So they're definitely worth downloading as a free game before you decide to either spend money on them or not. So yeah, that was kind of it. And then the other thing was UE5 games. Now, I noticed this the other day, which I thought was interesting. There's a lot of, you would have seen it on YouTube, 13th gen and 14th gen issues, CPU issues. And we know that they pull a lot of power, and they run hot because they pull a lot of power, so you can't do one or the other. And I've noticed, and I don't know why this isn't getting said or looked at, because if any of you were around in the New World debacle, if any of you played New World, obviously when that launched, it was the apparent cause of 3090s catching fire. Something that wasn't coded into the game properly, or something that was allowing them to go over. Now, I don't know if it was ever the actual game that got blamed for it, or what got blamed for it, but I have noticed, the first time I noticed it was in Grey Zone Warfare, and I noticed in Grey Zone Warfare when the helicopters come through, my CPU usage would go instantly quite high, and sometimes you'd get a bit of stuttering because of it. I then noticed when you went into the helicopter that my CPU was pulling, sometimes going up to 100% usage and hitting 100 degrees, which it doesn't do in Cinebench. So if I run a Cinebench R23 run right now, I'll hit 100% on all cores, but it won't push it to 100C. I've got enough cooling on it that it will reach about 89 or something like that. Whereas in this helicopter, it will hit 100% usage. I did put up to actually check it out. I did open a graph to actually check the cores, and every core, including the E cores, hit 100% usage, but it actually hits 100C. So obviously at that point it will thermal throttle. So I think that needs to kind of get looked into, because the second eye opener to that was Once Human, and Once Human seems to have a very similar problem. I think Terra obviously did a video, he looked into it, about putting a frame cap in, which will obviously stop your CPU usage from going quite high. But if you leave the frame cap off and allow it to run wild, I actually he obviously then noticed with his 7800X3D that it was hitting sometimes 100% usage, and I went back and checked with mine, and mine was hitting 100% usage on the 7800X3D, and on the 13700K it was hitting 100% usage. So a little bit dangerous that. Now I have noticed in other UE5 games that I've played recently, they come with a 120 FPS cap built into the game, which there's obviously no kind of mention of. But if you obviously run whatever settings up to 100 FPS and then you lower all the settings and try and go past 120, it's impossible to go past 120. Even if you try and add frame generation on top and upscaling on top, you're just sat at 120. So they're clearly a built-in 120 FPS cap. So I don't know. I don't know if UE5 has a problem and people aren't talking about it, and I don't know if the problem with UE5 is causing the Intel problem. Now, I'm not saying that Intel are not obviously to blame for whatever I'm not taking blame away from Intel, but this seems to be something that I am noticing on UE5 games. How or what can be done about that, I'm not sure. So we'll have to keep, I will be keeping a close eye on that, and I'd probably advise people that aren't doing so, using an overlay to check what your system is doing isn't a bad thing. I would suggest running an overlay, just so that you know, because when you see, I mean, to be fair, it's doing it in kind of bursts, but you don't want to be launching a new game without realizing that it's hitting your CPU at 100% usage and it's hitting on a thermal throttle level, because you are more likely, if you're gaming for a couple of hours, you might be causing damage and you're not even aware of it. And you're not going to want to do that with the 7800 X3D either. Now, I know that these CPUs have a built-in thermal throttle and it is to protect them. But at the same time, I know with something like the X3D chips that the 3D cache is, it's quite delicate. So I'd say be wary. Keep an eye out. Use an overlay. Take notice of it every now and then. Especially if you're in a game where you're getting some like stuttering or something like that, which might be an indication of you downclocking on your CPU or hitting the thermal limit. So, yeah, I think that's about it for what I've got to say at the moment this week. Nothing controversial, nothing come up crazy. I'm going to carry on doing some testing today. I might run a benchmark of, whilst I've got this monitor on, I'm probably going to see how the 4080 compares to the 7900 XTX in the First Descendant, because that is the game that I'm playing a lot of at the moment. So I might just go through, just on that resolution, I might just go through how it runs, compare settings to settings, so basically see what looks good, what doesn't look good, how I'd personally run the game with what I have in front of me. And then I'm just going to play some games for the rest of the week, and unless something controversial comes up, I've not really got a lot to say, unless someone points me in the direction of something controversial. So I'm going to end it there, because I've rabbled for too long. And yeah, I'll carry on with the couple of things I'm doing, and then I don't know, I'll find a subject and I will be back. So hopefully you've enjoyed. If you have, chuck me a like, and I will catch you in the next one.